You are listening to the 4-Phase Cycle podcast with your hosts, Megan and Alex of Zesty Ginger. If you're looking to naturally balance hormones and learn how to work with your body instead of against it, you have come to the right place. As a duo of an integrative MD and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, we use the 4 phases of the feminine cycle in combination with functional lab work to transform the lives of the women we work with. Just a quick reminder though, this information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your own doctor before making changes. Ready to take control of your health? Let's get started.
Hi there, this is Alex again. Thank you so much for joining me for our second Poclass. You guys are just the best. I wanted to hop in today and follow up with something that we started last week, which was syncing with your cycle. So yesterday or last time we talked about what that even meant and what it can do for your life. But today I wanted to talk about why syncing with your cycle is so important. And I wanted to give you some explanations and some examples of parallel things that we believe that I think we can apply to our cycle and the way that we view our health as females. All right? Okay, so let's get started. So why is syncing with your cycle even important? So modern life gives us a whole lot of challenges that are very unique now that haven't existed in the past. We are always constantly bombarded by so much more stuff than we ever have been as humans. And so part of the tenet of syncing with your cycle is actually beginning to change your relationship with some of the things that modern life pushes us to do. So it is saying goodbye to things like being everything to everyone, running yourself into the ground, or feeling inadequate or weak inside your own body. Okay, so syncing with your cycle, those are all the things it's not. We are never going to tell you that you need to be everything to everyone because that's not realistic. Somehow we've ended up being a full-time mom and a full-time boss and a full-time employee and a full-time wife or husband or partner that's supposed to just have a freshly cooked meal and want to have sex at night and want to do all this stuff. I mean, there's just so much that we are asked to do, and it's time for us to take that power back and say, I will choose what I choose to be in the world. I will choose what I will give and what I will receive. And that sort of balance is so much more healthy for us and allows us to take a step back out of that rat race and try to get back to what serves us and what fuels us. Okay, so that's the point. Now, we are unique. Megan and I are unique in that we structure all of our group programs. We have our 4-phase cycle detox, that's a group program, and our healthy hormones group program where we do functional lab work and then create a personalized protocol for each of our ladies. Just because we very much believe in the power of lab work to know exactly what's going on. And a lot of times we want to explain why we do things that way, because even in the functional world, we're a little bit quirky in that most people just ignore what's happening. Like you can start another group any day, and then most people even plan them around things like January 1st, right? Because it's handy, or when summer starts for that beach body workout or whatever. It's all external to you instead of realizing that what is happening internally is something that you can either work with or you can work against. And obviously, we think it's better to work with. And so let me give you an example. When we have seasons in our world, we kind of instinctively understand that in the winter, everything is going to rest. Nothing's going to be blooming. Everything's going to die off and kind of go into hibernation mode and restoration. Now, that's not to say that nothing happens there, right? We know that under the ground, the plants need the plants that grow in those regions where it gets cold or it rains or whatever it is, there's still things happening under the surface. It's just that it's not quite as exuberant and outwardly as something like spring, where everything is blooming, and it's summertime now when I'm recording this, and our rose bush that's outside just like blew up with roses. There's so many on there and it's gorgeous. Like, nature doesn't hold back, right? I can't even count the number of roses on that one bush, and that's just one thing in my yard. And we have no problem with this. We understand that that's how it works. And what we do in modern, where we also try to a little bit fight against this. So we can make a flower bloom in the winter by expending a lot of energy, expending a lot of resources, changing the setting. We can do that, but as you know, if you've ever had a strawberry in the middle of the winter that tastes like a potato, it takes a lot more energy and you don't get that same end result. Whereas in the spring, everything comes up on its own. There's nothing else that we have to do. I didn't have to do anything to that rose bush. It just bloomed because it was time for it to bloom. And that is exactly why it's so important to sync with your cycle. Megan and I can create you a protocol and then have you follow it blindly without thinking about your cycle. And honestly, that is what we did. And we did have quite a bit of results. But the women that we've had them take their cycle into account and sync with that, the results are there that were so much better with a lot less energy expenditure on our part and the part of the ladies that actually do it. I mean, it just makes it, it's not that it can't be done, but the results are not as good and the energy is a lot more. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is that the results are short-lived, because unless you change your relationship with not only your external world, but your internal world, it's really hard to heal from certain conditions. And I'll give you an example for my pain problem, or even infertility, but I'll stick with pain just because that's my number one thing that I'm working through. So I have the belief that I am, quote, a chronic pain person. And what I'm trying to change that belief to is I am a healthy person who has a history of chronic pain. And you can see that while the difference is subtle, it actually changes, it can actually change the success that I have with the things that I do. Because if I believe that I am a healthy person who has had the experience of pain, I can now take actions to keep being a healthy person and leave that pain experience behind. Whereas when you believe that I'm a sick, chronic pain person, even if I motivate myself up, I get my willpower in check, I'm really, I'm getting excited about everything, I will still continually sabotage myself, because in my subconscious, I believe I'm a chronic pain person and I want to be congruent with my beliefs. So at some point, I will begin to sabotage what I do to get better, because if I do that and I succeed, then it's not congruent with what I believe about myself. You can't be the sick person and wear that mask and be the healthy person and wear that mask. You just can't do that. You have to put the sick person down. You have to put that belief down and pick up the new one that says, I am healthy, I'm fertile, I'm pain-free, whatever it is for you. But that is why we believe the long difference takes, because it's really easy actually for us to have you do lab work. We get your results, we get your intake questionnaire, we look at everything, we create a protocol for you, and it's easy. You go to the store, you buy the stuff, and you start taking it, right? When it comes down to it, that work is actually quite easy to do, which is why people tend to focus there most of all. What we found, though, is that you will always end up sabotaging, or I'm using the word sabotaging, but you'll basically act in such a way that it matches up with your beliefs. So even if you get better and you stick with that for a while, a lot of times we've seen the moment you kind of stop thinking about it, you revert back to where you were, because that is what you truly believe. So this cycle work is deep. There's a lot going into it. There's a lot more stuff that we have to consider about our experience of this world and our bodies and our place in it that goes beyond taking supplements and doing detox tools and all of that stuff, which we will actually talk about, I promise. But I want to set up the reasoning behind why we do and why we focus on syncing with our cycles so much. Okay. So lastly, I want to finish this podcast with two things. I want to go over the 4 phases of the cycle just real quick, because the next one's going to be a much more detailed talk about that. And then who the people are, all the ladies that we've seen that would benefit from this type of work especially. So the 4 phases of the cycle include the release phase, which starts from day 1 of your period. And then the second phase is the rise phase, which is my personal favorite because your hormones are rising, you're gearing up to ovulate, you have all this energy, you do a bunch of stuff. Then there's the plateau phase, which is when our hormones tend to kind of level out, and that's when we power through and stick with whatever we initiated. And then the pause phase is the wrapping up and the reintegration into our real life for whatever we wanted to incorporate. And so those are the 4. And really, this type of living is how I hope eventually, Megan and I, it's our hope that all women will live like this. And historically, women have been, the whole red tent, and not that we all want to go live in the desert or in the woods for a week while we have our periods, but the whole point remains is they honored that time and they honored the cycle. And there was even, I read this really interesting book about in history, the relation of the moon to the feminine, which if you don't have a cycle, we're going to have you follow the moon cycle. It's another, cyclical event that happens in a really close proximity. The average female cycle is 28 days. The moon is 29 and a half. And so we have you follow that if you don't have a cycle. But hopefully all women will live like this, but it is especially helpful if you are dealing with things like infertility, hormonal acne, weight issues, whether that's weight gain or you have weight loss resistance where you're just like starving yourself and working out and you can't lose the weight and you don't know what's going on, or you have autoimmune issues, hypothyroidism, all of these, and did I say endometriosis, PCOS, all of it, all of those kinds of issues, whether you have spotting or you want to kill your partner 3 days before your period every time, all of that can help, because even though women are all very different in the way they cycle. We've had people with 20-day cycles. We've had people with 35-day cycles. We've had all sorts of diagnoses, hypothalamic amenorrhea to PCOS to endometriosis to POTS, which is postural orthostatic hypotension syndrome. We've had it all, but the truth of the matter is that when we take a step back and look at all those ladies with all those cycles, there are still similarities when you draw a map of each woman's cycle throughout the month and you overlay all the women in the world. That cycle will kind of look like the same thing. And so we can impact and include all of these differences in cycles within this flow, which is really great. And then it's especially true if you're already struggling with cycle related things and hormones, endocrine system, blood sugar regulation, gut, liver, whatever. All of this interfaces with it. And then the other thing is that regardless of where along the endocrine system, whether it's in the hypothalamus, your pituitary, your ovaries, your adrenals, your gut, wherever the problem is happening or whatever diagnosis that you have received, the thing is, it's not discrete like how we usually think of it. It's not, infertility, you go to a reproductive endocrinologist, and diabetes or poor blood sugar regulation, you go somewhere else. For us, it's all one system, and so all the women that we work with fall into the same category. And instead of looking at everything like this is different, this is different, this is different from each other, and let's separate them, what we want to do is bring it all back, because once you impact the entire endocrine system, it all begins to align, because the body is made to sync with this cycle. And what we're doing is just being aware of it and facilitating those things in your body. Man, our body is amazing. It will take care of the rest. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you understand the nature analogy and why we want to honor the down times, the really abundant times, and everything in between. And next week, or next class, we are going to kick off with details about the 4 phases of the cycle and kind of do a broad overview. And then after that, we're going to dig into each individual phase and look into action items. Now, Megan and I will do a quick note, are all about the action steps. So today, the only thing I want you to do after this podcast is go in to your apps on your phone and download some sort of cycle tracker. Our favorite is the MyFlow app, and the person that created that also does some cycle related work, even though our interpretation of the physiology is different. So we will say that some of the things you'll see on there is her take on it. Ours is a little bit different. We based ours off just physiology textbooks, and I was just looking at the raw data that we had, and that's how we came up with ours. So I don't want you to get confused, but that's a great app. It even reminds you, like, hey, you're in their ovulation phase, hey, you're in this phase, you're about to have your period, or whatever. And it's a nice reminder to be like, oh, it's time to go do this. Oh, that reminds me, have to go do that. And so go on there, get some sort of cycle tracking app, or even if you want to use a calendar, that's fine. But your homework today is to go out and make sure you're starting tracking. If you're already doing that and you want to get a little bit more granular with tracking your cycle, you can also go out and purchase LH strips, ovulation strips, and that measures the hormone, one of the hormones that rises prior to kicking off ovulation, and you can check for that. So starting around when your period gets done, you kind of start checking those days and then see if you're ovulating. If you don't have a cycle, that's totally fine. What I want you to do is go download a moon app, or just go Google it and find out when the cycle of the moon is, because everything else that we're going to do is either going to fall into your individual cycle, or if you don't have one, either because of PCOS or you're breastfeeding or whatever, you're going to go by the cycle of the moon. And it's actually really interesting. I'm going to go on a little side tangent. There's most women, the idea is that you ovulate during the new moon. Or I'm sorry, you have your period during the new moon. That's the dark moon phase. So that's when you don't see the moon in the sky. And then ovulation would happen around the time of the full moon. And historically, that's how many women, because when we live out in our environment, we're more responsive to that kind of stuff. Many women actually fell into that natural cycle. The healers were known to have the opposite cycle. So the women that tended to take care of the women tended to have their period at the full moon and have ovulation in the new moon. And so you were basically flipped, and those were the women that took care of everyone else when they were having their period, which is fascinating to Megan and I. And it's funny because practically when I've been struggling, or Megan has been struggling, whether that's stress at work, stress with life, kids are sick, whatever it is, we will flip into the cycle with everyone else. So having your period during the new moon, and then the other person who is like taking care of the partner ends up having the second cycle, the other version of it. So it's just fascinating how we interface with nature and how our bodies are so smart and so willing to kind of help us out and give us the signal like, hey girl, you're now in the phase that you need some help, so let Megan take care of you. And the more I live with this and the more I sync with my cycle, the more beautiful that ends up becoming. Instead of feeling like, oh, I'm slacking off, I should be writing blog posts, instead I'm asking Megan to do some of our work because I'm not feeling well. That ends up being okay, and it's totally fine. And I've done the exact same thing for her. And when my body gives me that message, I actually try to listen, because I get out of that phase, I recover from whatever happened and I get on with my life, and my cycle will reflect that. When I'm ready to go. Okay. And so Megan and I tend to fall into the cycle where, the healer cycle, but that is all falls within normal. It doesn't matter if you're syncing with the moon, but that is just to say, if you're not having a cycle, the moon is a great thing to follow, because historically we really have. Okay, guys, hopefully you guys found that interesting and helpful. Make sure you do your homework, don't forget, and then come back and listen to the next class. Alrighty, have a great day. Bye.
Hey, thanks for stopping by this Poclass. If you are ready to dig deeper into your health, really understand your cycle, stop guessing with random supplements, and start testing, our Healthy Hormones group starts September 27th. You can find more details at zestyginger.com/healthy hormones and find out if this is the place for you. And as always, we offer free 20-minute consultations, so jump on the phone with us and we'll help you decide if it's a good fit.